Hello Year 8 and welcome to this science lesson about the topic where do we come from, and today is lesson 9. Let's start with the driving question for today. Why does evolution happen? Remember to copy and underline the driving question in your exercise book below the driving question keywords for the lesson today. And last lesson we studied the definition of evolution. We said that evolution is how species characteristics changed over millions of years. We also said that present-day organisms have evolved from simple organisms over millions of years. This is because the simplest organisms are found in the oldest and the deepest rocks, and fossils of more complex organisms in the newest rocks at the topmost layer. To better understand evolution, we should mention one of the most famous scientists who dedicated his entire life and studies to evolution theory, ending with the theory of natural selection. And today we are going to understand how did he come up with the theory of natural selection. So during his studies, he visited many countries and islands, and he studied the animals and plants there. He was then particularly impressed by the animals on the Galapagos Islands in South America. He was particularly impressed by finches and their feeding adaptation. If you have a look at the picture, in fact, you can observe how each finch species feeds itself with a different kind of food. And they also show a different size and shape of beak. It seems that the two things are related, feeding adaptation and shape and size of beak. So observing this, Darwin gradually became more convinced that this was the result of a process of slow and gradual evolution. Let's try to understand it better. Those finches were geographically isolated with no competition from similar species. So then finches developed distinctive anatomy. We are talking about beak and size. So developed distinctive anatomy and also a unique feeding adaptation. Eventually, the beak is adapted in the different species for different purposes, such as crushing seeds or probing flowers for nectar. But how did it happen? If we make a step backward about how characteristics are inherited from parents in a species, we can also remember that if that characteristic gives an advantage to that individual, that characteristic will be more likely to be passed on to the next generation. So what happened is that some species individuals inherited the characteristic of size and shape of beak from parents. That characteristic help those individuals to feed themselves, to survive. And if they survive, they can successfully reproduce and pass on that advantageous characteristic to the next generation. So over several generations, based on different feeding adaptation, we have different species of finches with different size and shape of beaks. Now it's your turn with Think Per Share task to complete. You can complete it with someone next to you. Think your answer, share it with someone that next to you. Then I will share the mark scheme. So the question is, how do Darwin finches show evidence that species change over time? So please pause the video, take your time to do the task. Okay, so let's have a look to the mark scheme. How do Darwin finches show evidence that species changed over time? So the finches lived separately from each other. We said that they are geographically isolated. Each type had a different shaped beak. The beak shape was perfectly adapted for helping them feed in their own environment. The beak shape was being passed down from generation to generation within each type of finch because that specific shape and size of beak was an advantageous characteristic that helped that finch to feed itself. So to feed itself, to survive, so it breeds and of course pass that gene, that characteristic down from the next generation. If they all started at the same type of finch, then over time the best type pig must have been passed on each area based on the feeding adaptation, because the function of the pig is to help the finches to feed themselves. Okay? So now, as we said at the beginning, Darwin studied evolution and ended up with natural selection theory, and these are the three main steps that explain it. So variation is present between individuals within a species, then individuals with the most suitable characteristic breed successfully. Think about the finches with a side-shaped beak that help them with their feeding adaptation. Then, if the individual breed, then suitable characteristics get passed on to future generation. Okay, it's your turn again with a think per share task. Think your answer, then share it in pairs, and I will share the answer with the mark scheme when you will be ready. And the question is, why are some features passed on from parents to offspring more often than others? So pause the video, take your time to do the task. Okay, let's go through the mark scheme. So why are some features passed on from parents to offspring more often than others? So some features help the organism to survive better than others. The organisms who survive are more likely to breed. When they breed, their features get passed on more than other features. Over many generations, the features become more common in the species. Okay, now let's try to better understand how natural selection works. So think that we have a place with lots of seeds. In this kind of environment, the Nihoa finch will find easier to survive because its beak is helpful in crushing seeds. Instead, Achypola find it harder to survive with its beak. It can feed itself, so Achypola won't be able to breed, and we will have fewer and fewer of these individuals in the environment. Instead, Nihoa population will be able to feed itself, it will survive and breed successfully. So we will have more and more of these finches because the gene of Nihoa beak shape is more likely to be passed on. Instead, if you have a place with lots of marks but no seeds, Nihoa this time will find harder to survive because of its beak. So it won't be able to feed itself and survive, so it won't to breed, and we will have fewer and fewer of these finches in that environment. Achypola instead will find it easy to survive this time. So it will feed itself, it will breed successfully, and the gene for its beak will be more likely to be passed on to the next generation. Okay? So it's again another task for you. Again, a think per share. You need to think about your answer. Talking pairs with someone next to you, one of your parents, one of your siblings, and then I will share the mark scheme. So the question is, in your own word, what is Darwin's theory of natural selection? So please pause the video, take your time to do the task. Okay, so the mark scheme is the organism with the feature that help them survive are more likely to breed. These features are more likely to be passed on to the next generation because if an individual will survive, of course, it will it will successfully breed. And over many generations, the future of the species will change to be better adapted to survive, because it is the advantageous characteristic that will be passed on to the next generation. So over many generations, you will have that characteristic will be more common in that population, okay? Because it's the one that is better adapted to that kind of environment, okay? Now, another little task. Which statement is a false? You have 4 options. One is the right one, the false one. So go through them, pause the video, take your time, and we will check when you will be ready. Brilliant. So which statement is a false? And the one false is B. In Galapagos Dam, we observed that finches had different beaks adapted for a specific function. Okay, now as a normal science lesson, we have the second bit is writing phase. I prepared for you 4 different questions. Actually, in the next one, I prepared for you also some starting sentences to help you to do the task. So please pause the video, take your time to do it, and we will check with the mark scheme together when you will be ready. Okay, get ready with a green pen to mark your work and add extra details. So for the first one, future get passed on to the next generation. Genes for the future are passed on from parents to offspring. So the characteristics are inherited are always passed on from parents to offsprings. Then explain why some features are more likely to be passed on to the next generation. Features are more suitable for the environment, allow to survive the survival of the organism. The organism are more likely to breed and pass on the future to the next generation. Okay, if the future is suitable, will help that individual to survive. If it will survive, it will breed, so that feature will be more likely to be passed on. Explain how natural selection causes the feature of a whole species to change over millions of years. The organism with the most suitable feature will reproduce. The population with that specific feature will get bigger and bigger. The organism with the least suitable will be less successful in reproduction. Over millions of years, and of course you will have fewer of that population. Over millions of years, only organisms with suitable feature will survive in a species. And for the last one, explain how Darwin finches provide evidence for natural selection. So the finches live separately from each other, geographically isolated is fine anyway. Each type had a different shaped beak. The beak shape was perfectly adapted for helping them feed in their own environment. The beak shape was being passed down from generation to generation within each type of finch. If they all started at the same type of finch, then over time the best type of beak must have been passed on in each area. Okay, based on the environment, based on the food that is available, you will have different species of finches with different size and shape of beak that will help them to feed themselves and survive. Today I've achieved. Remember, the first graph is for describe, explain, use, and combine. Please remember that what you have achieved is what you've done on your own and not in green pen. That because I could help yourself with these sentences to complete it. Pause the video if you need time. And the very last thing that I need to tell you is don't forget the 10-question quiz on Show My Homework related with this lesson. So thanks for today, well done, and see you the next one.